Hi, and thank you for joining us for Career Ed Live today. I'm here with Jennifer Brown, who also works in our office. My name is Denny Doherty, and today we're going to talk to you about navigating a tough job market. It's probably no secret, a lot of you, if you watch the news or if you're looking for a job, or if you're generally not living under a rock, you probably know that the job market is not the strongest it's ever been here at the moment. It's tough, and there's no denying that. I've got a couple figures for you on that. According to the U.S. Department of Labor, the unemployment rate was nearly 15% in May, 15%, which is crazy. This is when people traditionally graduate, at least often, in May. Now, some good news that we have is luckily for July 2020, the unemployment rate is estimated to be closer to 11.1%, which is still pretty high, but compared to 15%, it is an improvement. It's a far cry from 3.7%, which is where we were a year ago in July. So that's kind of the depressing part. But the good news is, at least from these figures, it looks like we may be moving in a productive direction. So I feel like we got to celebrate small victories. So if you're a recent graduate, or perhaps you found yourself unemployed, or maybe if you're a student wondering about what things are going to look like in a year or two, like, are things going to get better? Maybe you don't graduate till next year, but this is scary. Is it still going to be this bad next year? We're going to go ahead and we're going to talk to you a little bit today and give you our perspectives on that. And some things to keep in mind that I think can give us a source of hope too, is that the job market might look bleak, and it is, it does, but it's not the first time this happened. A decade ago, the unemployment rate was actually not much better during the Great Recession. It peaked at about 10.6% in January of 2010. So things happen. The economy, it goes in cycles. We have good times, we have bad times, and like I said, right now, especially if you're a typical age undergraduate student, this might seem kind of scary, especially coming off of what the last couple of years has been a really good job market. But I guess the good news is things go back and forth. So what we're seeing right now probably is not going to be the end of the world. Now, the reason I wanted to talk about this today, about navigating a tough job market, is I'm a 2009 graduate from my undergraduate studies. And like we talked about during the Great Recession, 2009, 2010 was also a very tough job market. And it's funny, in preparation of this, I realized I'm kind of talking about myself a lot, and I don't like to do that. But I'm trying to take this from the approach of, okay, I've been here, some of the situations that students may be finding yourselves in. 10 years ago, I was in the same position. So I want to approach it more like, here's what I learned, here's some advice I can give you. I'm not even usually comfortable talking. I'd rather talk about anything else other than myself. I do want to share what I've learned. So I hope that's the tone that this will take. Like we said, historically looking at the economy, many times over, back and forth, it rights itself, which sounds good, but what do I do until then, right? So I want to go ahead and share some things I have learned through navigating a tough job market. And as we go here, we had some thoughts too. We're going to kind of weave these together. We're going to go back and forth, and we're going to share our perspective. The first thing that I learned, and I think it was definitely a mistake that I made going through a tough job market, is the question I want to ask you is, what are you doing to make yourself better? What I did is I was applying for jobs, not hearing back, applying for similar jobs, not hearing back, applying to similar jobs, not hearing back, and lather, rinse, repeat. And you probably get the picture from what I just described. The issue with that is I wasn't doing anything to make myself better. I was just hoping that one day something would fall from the sky and I would get my job. Which didn't, especially not the way I thought it was going to. That's not how it happened. So a question I want to put out to you is, if you're not getting callbacks now, will you get callbacks for a job in a month? What about 6 months? Okay, these are questions you want to ask yourself. So, and even though you're in a tough job market, you want to think about things like investing in yourself. Now, the good news is I think even compared to 10 years ago, there are ways to do that. We have things called like LinkedIn Learning, for instance. If you don't want to do like an online course, maybe you can learn a new skill. Take a part-time job to develop a new set of skills, because I talk to students about this all the time. Like for instance, a student will come in and they'll say, should I put this job on my resume? It's just McDonald's. And I'm like, no, drop the just. There's no just. You learn a lot in a job. So you want to get in the habit of building up the skills you have, not underselling them. So perhaps it is taking a part-time job to develop a new set of skills. Every day you want to do something to improve yourself. The decisions you make every day take you one step closer or one step further from your ultimate goal. You want to make sure you're taking steps Some students, we're going to talk about this a little bit more as we go here, and we talked about in our last session, some students have run into issues with internships because after what I just said, you might say, yeah, Denny, that sounds great, but I had an internship to improve myself, and my internship was canceled. But then, so like I said, if internships in particular are an area of interest, you want to go back, you want to check with the last career at the live session that we did. Ashley Vanderpool from my office at length. But that is a valuable, or rather a credible concern. What if my internship was canceled? So the good news is there are still options out there for building a resume apart from internships. Now, number two, speaking of part-time jobs, you might want to rethink being overly picky about what job offers you accept. Here's kind of what I thought was going to happen. I thought when I graduated, someone's going to have me. I have this degree. I'm going to waltz into the job. But the worst thing I'm going to have to figure out is which one of the many offers I'm going to accept. And that was not my experience. Oh, how naive I was. What happened with me was I applied to things where I was sure I was a perfect candidate. And I'm like, I'm a shoo-in for this. I'm like, I'm going to be at the top of the stack. I never got a call back. And it was funny because I actually applied to a part-time teaching job at a small business college. It was like just about walking distance from my house at the time. And I thought, they won't want me. I have no shot at doing this. This is so. I'm like, why not? And they called me the next day, or they called me that day. I was hired the next day. 6 days later, I was in the classroom, and then that launched a career in higher education. So, like I said, one of the misconceptions I had was that I thought employers going to be lining up to hire me. And that's never a guarantee, even in a good job market. It's got to be a tough job market. It might be just that much more difficult, because I know one of the issues I ran into 10 years ago, or 11 years ago now, I guess, is that even for entry-level jobs, I was competing against people who had 15 and 20 years experience. And if you're competing against that, it's from an employer standpoint, what does this kid have to offer that this professional with all this experience doesn't? So, and again, I don't want that to sound too bleak, but it's just the reality of the situation. And these are questions you want to ask yourself. These questions, you can answer these questions and figure out how to best proceed. Also, something you want to think about is you want to demonstrate to an employer that you have relevant skills. Having a degree is wonderful; it's a very important thing. I always tell students this when I go to do presentations. I work in higher ed, so I never want to demean the importance of a degree, but the degree is great. It's a very important piece of the puzzle, but it's not the only piece. And you want to be thinking about showing an employer that you have relevant skills. Things like, we like to refer back to a thing called the NACE 8 competencies. These include skills like communication skills, teamwork skills, global intercultural fluency, among other things. So you want to pair skills like that with a degree if you want it to have the most complete package that you can. So, Jennifer, do you want to go ahead and talk? You raised a really good point about accepting offers with lower salaries during COVID. So take that away. Please be my guest.
Yeah, so as Denny was saying, it is a tough job market right now, and you might be competing with people who may have lost their jobs. So they may have 15 years of experience on you. So what you want to do is make sure that you are relaying. You're fresh out of school. You have all the latest education about what's going on. You're up on the trends going on in your field. So that is something that you could use to sell in your favor. And when doing that, if you do get a job offer, it might be a little bit lower than you were expecting. Things are tough right now. It is true. Jobs are hiring right now, but they might be hiring at a lower salary range. So some things that you want to consider is assessing your own financial risk. Is this a job that you're able to take right now and still be fiscally responsible? Can you pay your rent? Can you pay your utility bills? Can you pay off your education, your loans? These are all things that you want to consider. Maybe it's 5% lower than you were expecting, but you also have to think in a year, hopefully, things could be turned around. They may be giving out salary bumps. They may be giving out bonuses. So it's something that you want to see if your current budget could fit with it. You also want to weigh your other considerations. Do you have any other job offers on the table? Have you been looking for 6 months and you haven't found anything? This might be the time to go ahead and say, yes, I need to take this job. I've got responsibilities. I need to go ahead and take this, see where I am in a year, and then reassess. And then you want to also When you are deciding to accept a job offer, you want to pay attention to the company culture and mission. We have seen that that's something that's very important to this generation of students who are graduating. So it's almost like you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you, because you want to see what the culture is going to be like. Will you fit in there? Will you be comfortable there? Do you believe in the mission that they are putting out and want you to adhere to? So those are all things that you want to consider when you get that first job offer.
Absolutely. Wonderful thoughts on that. The next thing I wanted to move into is networking. I know you had some thoughts on that too. So do you want to take that away, or do you want me to chat about it a little bit? Or
Yeah, so networking is key, especially right now. You want to start building your network now before you need your network. Say you're a junior and you're watching this, start building your network now, because once you get to the time to graduate, you don't want to be scrounging around trying to find people to reach out to. You want to have that built-in network. You really should utilize LinkedIn. LinkedIn is one of the best ways to network with people who are in the same field or who are doing what you eventually want to do. And there's a section on LinkedIn where you can go to Marshall University and click on the alumni section, and you can go and narrow it down based on where alumni live, what field they work in, what they studied while they were here. And you can narrow it down exactly to, I want to live in Charlotte, North Carolina. I want to work in business. I have a business degree, and it will give you those people for you to go ahead and start reaching out to. So it makes it really easy for you to find those people who are going to want to help and give back. Alumni want to give back. It isn't always monetarily. They want to give back by self-service. So this is a great way to reach out to alumni to do that.
wonderful. I love all of that. That's great. One thing I feel that students, I think definitely me at the time, I feel like a mistake we made as far as networking goes is we overcomplicate it. We think that we make it into this big, huge thing. I think sometimes the word networking even scares us. Something I encourage students to do is just think about the people you already know, and absolutely do all the things you mentioned as well. But I always tell people, when you think about their friends' parents, think about their parents, think about their neighbors, think about stuff like that. So do you have any thoughts on that? Or
Yeah, absolutely. You never know who knows who. So if you have your best friend, you want to see maybe what their parents do. Is that someone that you could say, oh, you're in my same field that I want to be in. Do you know anyone? Or maybe they're not in the same field at all, but you can go on LinkedIn and see who their connections are and say, hey, could you introduce me? I see that you know so-and-so from this company. So you want to tap into your previous supervisors, your advisors, your friends and family, anyone that you can reach out to see who they might know, to open up a conversation is something you definitely want to do.
absolutely wonderful thoughts. In particular, I really like the asking for an introduction, because sometimes once or twice I've even thought about that, but it's like, how do you break the ice? I think that'd be a really great way to do that. So I think it's excellent advice.
Yeah, and you can actually, there is a feature on LinkedIn where you can see who your connections know, and there's a button that says ask for an introduction. So it really makes it super easy for you to do that. And then also, getting a one-on-one introduction or maybe an email introduction, since the current times may make being face-to-face a little bit harder.
Yeah, this is true, and yeah, it's a good point too. Even though face-to-face is it seems like a distant memory sometimes now, we have a lot of electronic ways to at least somewhat replicate that. So that's great. Very, very great thoughts on that. Thank you. Another piece of advice I would give students is to set attainable goals and be consistent with it. Because I think when you're consistent, you have a weekly attainable goal, it can keep you from getting burnt out. Like, for instance, I know before when I was looking for a job many, many years ago, I would get on a kick with networking or applying for jobs, and like, I'm going to find something this time. And I apply for like 12 things in like 3 days, or I'd go talk to like 14 people or something like that. Then I was burnt out, and I kind of came off of that high, so to say. Now I wouldn't do anything for like 2 or 3 weeks. And that's not to applying 10 or 12 places or making, a big handful of connections. Not that that's not good, but if you tend to work in those spurts or those bursts that may not be the most sustainable thing long range. So I would encourage people to do something, maybe set like an attainable goal, like say, this week, or every week, I'm going to intentionally network with 3 people. And doing that 3 times a week, I think is very attainable. And it doesn't have to be 3. I mean, you can set, whatever your other commitments are, you can set that number to where you think it ought to be. And also write stuff down too, because I think this is huge for me, staying on task. I mean, in my office here, I can't tell you how many to-do lists there are. I have to put things in print, and that helps me. And you want to be committed to writing things down too, because in my house right now, I think there are probably a half dozen started to-do lists that have never been finished. Like, okay, I'm going to commit to dropping a couple pounds. I'm going to commit to getting my house organized. Here's my list. And it's just a blank sheet of paper. So not only do you want to say you're going to write stuff down, commit to writing things down, commit to those goals, but of course commit to seeing those goals through to completion as well. And in the long run, I really think consistently networking with 3 people every week, or having, maybe you go to a networking event, maybe that can count as one, or maybe sending an email, reaching out to someone, seeing who they know, that could count as another one. Setting a goal like that and being consistent with it every week, I do feel in the long run is better than having these short bursts, because they can be very sporadic. And if you have constant up and downs, I think you're more likely to miss an opportunity when you're in one of those down periods, versus even if it's a little bit lower, if it's steady throughout. And that could, like I said, that could, I'm trying to say here, that could include everything from like job applications, a number of people want to reach out to, or just anything like that. Any of those little behaviors are going to move you closer to your goals. So yeah, go ahead.
And building on that, I always say that doing a job search is a full-time job. You really have to be committed to it. As Denny said, you really want to be organized. One of the best ways that I found for myself when I was doing a job search is to have an Excel spreadsheet where I would record every job that I applied for and the date that I applied for it, any reference numbers that they might give you, so that you can stay on top of it and you can see where you've actually applied. And if it's been a couple weeks or a month and you haven't heard anything, then you know that that's the day that you applied. And then you can go back and say, hi, I applied on February 10th. I was just checking in to make sure you got my application. I'm very eager to learn more about this position and work for this company. So it just helps you stay organized, because I do think right now, as you're doing your job search, even if you're like, well, I don't exactly meet the requirements, you should still go ahead and apply. It doesn't take that much more time to go ahead and apply. And you never know, you may not be exactly what you think they're looking for, but based on the other people who have applied, you could be their perfect fit. The other thing I was going to say is you need to have a unique cover letter for each position that you apply for. For the most part, your resume can stay the same, and you can have a template that you created for yourself for a cover letter, but each cover letter needs to be directly to that company and needs to talk about that job in particular, because companies can tell when you use the same one across the board. So it does take a little bit extra time, but as I said before, doing a job search is a full-time job, and you really need to be committed to it.
Absolutely, I totally agree with all that. And funny story on form cover letters is, and when I do presentations, I tell students that a form letter looks like a form letter, but even worse, you run the risk of leaving maybe a previous company you'd applied to. You run the risk of leaving their name in a cover letter for that new organization. And individuals who work on campus here have told me that they've ran search committees, they have seen it happen, and that's an immediate disqualification, because you don't get into Marshall by writing a cover letter, oh, Marshall's wonderful, and then having Shawnee State, for instance, appear in that cover letter.
Right.
I don't think anything gets you thrown out quicker. so wonderful thoughts on that. Another piece of advice I want to talk about is seeking out a mentor, someone to help you through this process. And I know, especially early on in my career, was not something I was necessarily good with either. I would recommend one of 2 things: someone either in your field who knows the ins and outs of your field very well, or someone who can provide you the encouragement you need to keep going. Now, if you find both of these in one person, all the better. But I think both of these can be things, especially during a difficult job search, both of these can bring value to your job search. Sometimes you need a connection, sometimes you need the little nuances of whatever it is in your career. But sometimes, honestly, even if someone doesn't get it, you just need someone to say, hey, it'll be okay. You just got to keep going, keep your head up, and And it's amazing what one of those little pep talks can do for you, especially if you're a little bit down in your luck that week. And when I say mentor, it doesn't have to be singular either. I mean, professionally and otherwise, I feel very blessed because I have a wealth of people I feel like I can go to, or a big handful anyway. So you don't have to have one singular mentor either. I mean, you can have a few. Some might be more encouraging overall. Some might know the ins and outs of your field a little bit more than others, and having different people you can go to at different times. But definitely, it's tough. I think sometimes it can be tough. Looking for a job can seem like an uphill battle, but no one's saying that you need to do it on your own. And I think it's really good to do that. So I think you had some thoughts on how long will it take to search for a job. So do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, just kind of bringing all of this together, wrapping all of this up. It's just good to know that typically in a normal job market or a good job market, it could take between 6 months to 1 year to find a job. So just know that going in, this may take some time. Companies are still trying to figure out what's going on. We're all trying to figure out what's going on. It seems like it changes day to day.
Yeah.
So just be flexible. If you were dead set that you need to stay in Huntington, you might need to expand your search and look in Charleston or some of the other surrounding areas. You may even need to look out of state. The perfect job for you could be in Kentucky. So you just need to be flexible about your location, maybe your job function. If you thought that you were going to be on this direct line to being an accountant, maybe there's some other things sprinkled along the way that could help get you there, that you could, start getting a salary and start paying off those loans and, meeting your financial needs. So you just want to be aware that it may take some extra time. Companies are hiring, and we are a service that you can use. We are free for alumni forever, and we can be your accountability partner. We can be that person to say, hey, have you been applying for jobs? Let me see your most recent resume, how your cover letter looks, what's going on with your interviews. Do you want to do a mock interview? So while we are career coaches, we do career development, we can also be accountability partners for you.
Yeah, I like that a lot, absolutely. And sometimes when I've done this a number of times since I've been here, if someone is entering a process that might be longer than a few weeks, if it's switching careers or finding a job, sometimes I encourage recurring meetings every few weeks or so, and we can be very intentional about that too. Hey, tell me how are things going? Let me see your most recent cover letter, and a lot of times to try to troubleshoot too. And speaking of troubleshooting, it's a little off my script, but I usually tell students to think about how far you're getting in a process too. If you're getting calls about a job, your resume and doc, odds are they're probably okay. But if you're not getting a second interview, it's potentially maybe it's your interviewing skills. If you're not getting calls at all, of course, especially nowadays, things are so haywire, but if you're not getting calls at all, maybe there's something in your application that's problematic. And there's just a few examples, but if you consistently get to one point in the process and can't get any further, you may want to assess what you're doing at that point. That might help you out a little bit figuring out how to best proceed.
Absolutely.
I don't think we have a whole lot else. Do you have any other closing thoughts for us, Jennifer?
Just stay positive. It's tough out there, but again, I've said it multiple times throughout this. Companies are hiring, but just be flexible, stay organized, and you'll get to where you need to be.
Absolutely, and that last part is key because like I said, I've been out of undergrad 11 years. Even as an undergrad, I thought, hey, it might be cool to work in higher ed one day, and I'm doing it. But the path to getting here, it looked nothing like what I thought it was going to. But I still got to somewhere where where I like what I do. I like coming to work every day, and I feel like for most of us that good things will happen, and we'll get to where things have a way of working out. We'll get to where we need to be. But sometimes, the journey might be a little bit longer. Sometimes you might take the scenic route. Sometimes it's not I-64 all the way there. Sometimes it's a windy back road with some potholes, but you'll get there. So to say. But anyway, thank you so much for joining us today for Career Education Live. This is a new outreach from the Office of Career Education. We are going to be doing this once per month. And like I said, thank you so much for joining us today. We just hope this content has been of value to you. And like Jennifer said, just stay positive and keep your heads up.
Thanks.